I don't know why mine doesn't start with a video, but it is what it is.
Dude, it's all good. We're here.
Episode 3, recording Earl.
Episode 3. Dude, how's the last week been?
Not bad. I, to be honest, I'm actually very excited to have another conversation.
Oh, right
And
on.
yeah, they, the last two have been good. I'm excited that we're like, I feel like the third week, now the ball's truly rolling. Like anyone could do two. I don't think anyone does three.
That's true. I
Yeah.
don't know what the statistic is on like what episode people stop typically doing a podcast, but it's probably 2.
Yeah. I mean, I'd
Dustin,
put my
look
money
that
on it.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody fact checked us ever on anything we say.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a few things, but definitely not this one.
Yeah. Good. As it should be.
Hmm.
Just consider us an authority figure.
Hmm.
What are we talking about?
Well, last week you had the idea. I think this week I finally pulling the weight a little bit on the team. We're gonna talk about some social wellness or social connection and and how it affects health. Um, One of the reasons I had brought it forward it is I was working out by myself, doing a workout that, to be honest, was how I would describe kind of just like a suck fest. Just like you're grinding through it and just having to go through it. I'm like, it would be so much more fun if I had someone next to me while I was doing this. Because at minute 7, when you're doing burpees for what I was doing, you start really thinking and questioning some of your choices.
Yeah.
And it just probed me to be like, man, like, typically working out more by myself now, generally, compared to before working out with others. And you would like get energy from other people from, I probably have some inner competitiveness trying to, lift a little bit more than them sometimes or run a little bit quicker or whatever. But just like also just like seeing someone else be smiling while they're doing some deadlifts with you or whatever, it definitely, yeah, it just had me thinking.
For sure, dude. It's kind of like despite all the flack that CrossFit gets, like most of that flack I think is unjustified because at the end of the day, they created a social environment that put more barbells in people's hands than anybody. And even if I'm not a CrossFit guy, you got to like admit that the social dynamic of it like was enormous for getting really unfit, unhealthy people into like some measure of fitness or some measure of like enthusiasm, especially regarding fitness.
Hmm.
It's just pretty undeniable.
Yeah. And I think with with our goal of, really trying to have that impact on rural communities, in a sense, we're isolated, right? Obviously some more than others. And I was just thinking like, how do I feel like in a rural community, we're going to need to put more emphasis on some of those social connections and not just like social connection as far as like finding a friend or whatnot. And obviously there's some of that to do with it, but even just like the the technologies and the amenities and all of that that can you'd have it would be quote unquote easier and call it Vancouver compared to a more rural setting.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is also just like when you have a higher population, it's easier to like find your tribe, so to speak. Like if you're like, oh, I went and tried a CrossFit gym. I didn't like it. It's like, well, there's another 100 you can try. And then there's like another 1,000 spin classes you can try and another, you know, 50 Gold's gyms. Like there's a lot of options that you can go to. I think like in a smaller town that the variety component is probably less there. which I think is probably a contributive factor.
Yeah. I think, I think that what we can, while there might be less opportunity, I think it also means we just need to be a little bit more creative on it. We have to maybe rely less on that thing being there for us and have to then like take it upon ourselves to create it. So like, you know, for using myself as an example, I probably put myself I've forced myself to be more, I guess, isolated when I'm doing exercise versus just like taking the initiative to reach out and being like, "Hey Nathan, you want to go on a ruck this morning? I'm putting my weight in my backpack and I'm going for a 30-minute walk. You want to come with me?" Like I haven't even done that. And I think I was when I was thinking about this, like, some of that could be super valuable, information to pass along to some of our clients and individuals, that like putting that message out there, like you don't have to go at this health wellness exercise quote unquote journey like alone. Like find someone that either wants to do it, or maybe find someone that maybe isn't necessarily there yet, but if you keep on them they might join you. And you know
Yeah, we almost like it'd almost be like a good idea. We should try this where kind of like instead of doing like like a Craigslist sort of thing, you could put like an ad in the gym, like training partner wanted, and then like you just like have your variety of interests or like fitness goals, whatever, and then like people could like take your number or sign up or whatever. I think that'd be hilarious, but also like super practical. Like, why not?
hmm
Uh
yeah.
yeah, it's cool. It's also like I think that I mean this isn't like any different in a city, but like I think getting to know people is quite challenging. I think that there's this vulnerability that comes with fitness. I think about like the example that I often use on this topic is I think about like my dad or my dad's generation, where they go to school or in university, and you go to check your exam scores and you all go to the classroom, and there's just like this list that's got everyone's names and all of their exam grades. And it's like, it's brutal. It's like so vulnerable, like, as opposed to like in my year you could find your student number, which nobody else knows, and then you find your grade and then you just like don't tell anyone because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Or at least in my
You're
case.
like, oh, weird, I'm not on there. I don't know what. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
there you go.
I don't know. Prof must have forgot mine.
Yeah, for sure. So like I think that like exercise in so many ways is like my dad or my dad's generation's experience, where it's like your effort is on full display and the results of your effort are on full display. There's no hiding it. So I think about how there's always this funny moment when people go on a hike together, and for the first 15 minutes everyone's pretending to like breathe through their nose, but everyone's like and like everyone does it. And it's just like it's just the initial moments of a hike when your body's trying to like determine which energy system it draws from, but everyone does it and everyone tries to hide it. And it's so funny the moment you go like, oh, this is actually like very physiologically normal. And also like, in a hiking context, if someone is like struggling, it's like, so what? We're, at least in my case, it's like, hey, we're out here to enjoy nature or to enjoy social company. So if you're having a hard time like keeping up, we'll just slow down. But I think like the concept of reaching out to someone uh and being like, hey, do you want to do some fitness together, can be like pretty intimidating.
Hmm like on the thought of like reaching out. I was really thinking. I think it's super beneficial for people to have different like buckets of people to reach out to. So like there's like the person you do feel comfortable reaching out to work out with. And I would probably say generally that might be someone in similar situations to yourself. I think there's a lot of value in being in completely opposite situations as well. But I think generally people will tend to be more towards like that physical, your fitness levels or experiences with the like in a gym, so on. But I think there's like huge benefits to finding like that person that you can be vulnerable about, like, your relationships with, or finding someone you can just like nerd out or geek out about your favorite like Star Wars stuff or Star Trek, or well, not maybe not Star Trek, but
Probably not Star
uh,
Trek, but Star Wars
yeah,
completely.
yeah, Star Wars completely fine.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, like having those different buckets of people, because you're going to be so much more comfortable in those conversations with them, and then you're also like you're just getting different positive social interactions. And I think being like super um like cognizant of when you're reaching out to those people to like make yourself feel better and be involved in those is really important for people.
Yeah. Would you for those different buckets, would you add like sport participation? So like exercise, but maybe exercise in a recreational sense. Would you like consider that to be like its own bucket or like its own category that you could reach out to other people with?
So like, yeah, like are you meaning like almost like a subcategory within said thing, or more just like
Totally.
a
Yeah.
yeah.
Like if you're like, oh, like how would you categorize like the relationship that you need, the vulnerability, the lack of vulnerability that would like be required if you like, for example, move to a new town and you don't know how to ski or you don't know how to skate or like I think in a small town where it's like everyone seems to know how to ski, everyone seems to know how to skate. And if you're the odd one out and you want to make that jump into that recreational pool, like how do you do it? Like how do you make that jump? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think, my initial gut reaction is like you you kind of have to throw yourself in a little bit and like be willing to be vulnerable and be like maybe not so great at something, because like you're if you take that step into that new social dynamic situation, like whether it be skating or skiing, whatever, like there's so many good people in those, if in those sports, or we can go outside of that, we can talk like a music club or a book club, or
Totally.
you name said activity, like there's so many good people in there that like you being the beginner, you're going to get so many people wanting to bring you in and be a part of their tribe, and then you're just going to learn so much from them.
Totally.
I know you actually might be able to speak pretty well on that, on trying a new sport outside of like the sports we like in kid when we're younger, we kind of just all do the things that you have to do through high school. But I know you've tried a new sport through adulthood and got to experience that all over again.
Yeah, I've tried that a few times. I think like most notably, jujitsu was probably the sport where I was like, I have no experience of this. And then I just got like my ass kicked like on a regular basis. And it was super fun. But like if I went in there and I'm like, I'm a big guy, I'm probably gonna win. Dude, I would have been wrecked, man. I was getting ragdolled by people who were like 20 years older than me. So this is me at like 21. So I was getting ragdolled by people who were like 40, mid 40s. Were not like even like super elite grapplers, like they were like blue belts. And I was probably like for one guy in particular who absolutely wrecked me. I think I was probably 80 pounds heavier than him, and he didn't look like a super fit dude. And I like went into it and I'm like, I know this guy's gonna beat me because I know his experience level, but on paper, it doesn't like look like it. And yeah, getting out grappled by someone, it was awesome, but really humbling. And you just kind of have to jump in and just be like, all right, I'm just gonna, learn the hard way.
Yeah. But in it,
Was that the sport you were thinking of? Was jujitsu?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, jujitsu.
yeah,
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it didn't take like I would say it probably didn't take you long to be able to like identify as a jujitsu doer or participator. Like you're like, yeah, those are my peeps. Like I like doing that, and you can like take that on as part of your identity. And I think the more we can expand that your identity, like an individual's identity, and have them, be the person that is part of a backyard gardening club or like a community garden, or that the book club or a drama club or a sporting activity. Like there's just, I don't think there's any downside for like overall health benefits to being in numerous positive interactions like that, like
Totally.
throughout a week. And I think the more variety, it's like vegetables, like the more variety the better.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I had a great conversation with a client a couple weeks ago who was sort of, this client of mine is kind of breaking out of their shell. Um, they had a lot of anxieties, particularly social anxieties, a lot of body image implications. And one of the conversations I was having with this individual was how, like, when trying to make a friend in a small town, it can feel a bit like speed dating. Like it can feel like asking someone out. It's like it's not just like, it's not like in the movies when you just like bump into one another in the hallway. I mean, sometimes that happens, but like for the most part, it's not like you're just all of a sudden like, oh hey, we're in close proximity, and like lo and behold, we get into an amazing conversation where we have like tons of overlapping interests. That like never happens. I mean, sometimes it happens, but for the most part, you got to put work in. Like you got to
Yeah.
apply
It
some.
doesn't always happen like me and you.
Yeah, yeah, of course not. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not everyone has what we have, Riley.
Yeah, I know.
um, but yeah, like so one of the things was like people go like, oh, I'm lonely, or and they get intimidated by the idea of doing like joining a club because they go like, I'm not athletic, or I don't know if I'm athletic because I've never participated in anything in school. I'm only now emerging into the world of physicality. And I think the lowest barrier of entry is probably like hiking in a small town, hiking and snowshoeing. You get a killer workout. There's so many like scalable varieties. Like it's not like everyone's like, let's do a 25K hike. Like it can be like something short. But you get to be outside, you get some sunlight, you get to be with people in a context where most people are pretty conversational because you're right next to someone. And like you know with this particular client, it was like, what effort have you gone to seeking out these relationships? And for the most part, it's like none, because it's intimidating. But Facebook, for all of the all the ways we can complain about the mental health issues related to social media, man, Facebook is like got it's ground zero for joining a club, joining some fitness community. Not even like a fitness community, but like an activity community. There's
Yeah.
tons. You could join a crib club or a chess club if you wanted to, which is like a great way for socializing. It doesn't quite address the physical element that we're looking at, but it's still great.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like hiking or biking groups, or people. There's it's it's like one of those things where you feel weird like reaching out, because you go like, is this person going to reject me? But like they probably won't.
No.
And at some point you
The,
can just wear someone down as well.
the worst thing that happens is they say no,
Totally.
right? Like obviously there's a lot more, you know, the person's perspective on that said no, but like if you really boil it down, it's like they say no, they say no.
Yeah. And like honestly, if I because I'm very sensitive. I've kind of always been this way. I'm very sensitive to like uh putting off vibes of like elitism. So like for example, like I really enjoy snowboarding. Basically anyone who's talked to me for 10 minutes knows that I enjoy snowboarding. And
2 minutes.
yeah, it doesn't take very long. And I like to go, I like to do some relatively advanced runs. But if someone came to me and they were like, hey Nathan, can you show me how to snowboard? Because I have a season's pass, so I've got like lots of days to go out. I'll probably say yes. And if I don't, I'll say next time, which I'll, I mean it. And, if I went to someone and I was like, hey, I like don't know how to play hockey. And I asked them, I'm like, hey, can you show me? Can I tag along with you? If they were like, no, I don't think so. I would be like, oh man, I dodged a bullet there, because like that person probably wouldn't be very fun to skate with.
Hmm.
Even if they reluctantly said yes, if they just saw me as like, someone that they were dragging along and they didn't really want me to hang out with them, probably would be less enjoyable to go than it would be to be told no and then go find somebody else who's like actually wants to hang out with me and actually wants to see me participate in the sport or activity, you know?
Yeah, big time. I know that was one of the things I thought would be cool to discuss, was just like when you're having these social interactions, like I feel like words really matter. And like the way, if you're gonna show somebody something, or when you go out in your day to day and you ask someone the simplest thing of like, how are you doing, or how's your day been, like I think if you truly start meaning those things, like others around you pick up on that,
Yeah.
and then instantly it's a more positive conversation,
Yeah.
like and that's not to say, like sometimes, like, yeah, you're walking in the hall at work, or you're you know on Main Street, sometimes it's just a, hey, how's it going, good, you, and you keep going, because those are interactions. But like, there was, I'm not sure who, I don't know, I probably saw it on social media, to be honest, somewhere, and there's the idea of like social snacking. And it's like the small interactions where it could just be very meaningless, and like actually turning it into something meaningful. And I know, like, when I work with clients, like that first like 3 to 5 minute interaction, before they're even like going through some like warm up or whatever, like it's like, if I haven't seen them in a week, like what's gone on, or
Mm.
let's elaborate, if we've messaged over like a programming app or whatever, like it's like, let's dig deeper into it, because you can get more out of that conversation with face to face with someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like from a rural perspective, do you feel like that complexity of like developing greater relationships in the world of like health and activity, do you feel like, what are like the opportunities or like the limitations that you see in like a rural context compared to like maybe a more urban context? Like we kind of already talked about how in a city, if you don't like it, there's like a plethora of options, whereas in a small town there's like um you kind of sometimes have to just make things work, which I think comes with a lot of positive elements. To having to make things work like means that you have to get out of your comfort zone a lot more, and that means you have to like socialize with people who are different from you, which like is only good in my opinion. But like
Mm-hmm.
apart from like that aforementioned like aspect, do you see any other aspects about like doing that in a rural context that has opportunities or difficulties?
I can almost see in one side, based on a rural community, you might actually, like, as far as like socially seeing, you might actually see a more active population, just based on like geographics. Like, it's you know things are usually, sure, they're close, but like they're more spread out, as far as like there's only one place to go get something, there's only one place to go to the gym, maybe, where
Sure.
like in a city, you could probably live your whole life right in a little box. Like, is there way more opportunities if you go outside of that? Sure, but you could probably get stuck in this small box, where in those rural communities, just by nature of it, everyone in that community, you kind of have to be involved with each other for things to like to like progress. So I think there's some positives there. Um, but on the flip side, I think if you are in that rural community and the legacy of just the only things you're seeing might not be positive, it can really, pull you in the wrong direction. Like I think of, why do I like exercising? Why do I like being in, you know, bigger groups of people? Like why does that bring me energy? And it's probably because my parents showed me social interactions with groups of people, and like I saw them working out at 6 a.m. before I'd wake up to go to school when I was like 5 or 6. So it's like if you have that role model and you've been part of those social like dynamics, it just like continues. But if you've been a part of, you know, go to work, maybe your role model was go to work, which obviously everyone probably has to do some sort of work. You got to go do something, but comes home, sits on a lazy boy, and watches TV till 11, and then goes to bed and sleeps for 5 hours, and then wakes up. And like if that's all you've seen, and that was that social circle, it can almost feel probably trapped. You feel like trapped in that as someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that made me think a lot about like you mentioned earlier about like I can't remember how you articulated it, but like the power of like very small interactions. Like if there's like one gym in your rural community and that gym is like, dominated by really intense meathead. I mean, I'm a meathead, so nothing against meatheads, but like if it's an unpleasant experience, that the negative consequences are actually quite high. Like, if you have picture a scenario where someone is like, say, a 30 or 40-year-old woman who has like a genetic predisposition towards osteoporosis. So she's female, has a genetic disposition. The chances of you getting osteoporosis are like quite high. And it's like, hey, you can't just like jog this away because you need to be load bearing. You should try out the local gym, go to the local gym, and then like you have to listen to some like, really like a really, really intense music and a really, really intense argument, or really like everything is just like this hyper stimulating element. I think in a city, you can kind of go, okay, cool. Like that's this gym's vibe. I'm going to go to this gym down the street or whatever. But in a small town, it could be like, that could be such an intimidating moment that, she might never come back. And then she does get osteoporosis. And, I understand that like, kind of what we talked about, like to some certain degree, you definitely have to just kind of stick with the social atmosphere that has been presented because there aren't necessarily other options. But I think as a coach, I think about how the implications of how I greet people is like quite high. And I know we've talked about this a lot about how in a lot of ways, not in its entirety, but in a lot of ways, gyms should operate almost like in like a ER, like room in a like an emergency room in a hospital, where there is a common necessity for the environment, and that necessity does not prioritize prowess. So like picture a scenario where someone like comes in to, the ER at like 3 a.m. and they're like, I don't know, say they've like broken their leg, and there's somewhere over there who's like, you know, perfectly fine, or like maybe has like a bleeding nose, and they're like, ha, what are you doing here, loser? Because you're in worse physical shape than me. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? That's the exact opposite of like why you're
Yeah.
supposed to be here. That's kind of how a gym
Yeah.
should operate. Like in a lot of ways, like it should be, hey, you're overweight, or you have some injury, or you have mental health issues, whatever. You have like a greater necessity for resistance training than, our 19-year-old clientele that's never had an injury, which should still be working out, but on a scale of triage, like on a scale of priority,
Mm-hmm.
it should go in priority to that person who like is really needing it. and that's, I think, how we try to operate. And I think that in a best case scenario, all rural communities should have clubs that operate in that particular way, where it's like, hey, I'm new to hiking. It's like, sweet. Like being new to hiking, if you're like from a small northern Canadian town and you go like, what, you've never hiked before? But like, first of all, like I've met people from Ontario and Manitoba who had never hiked before moving to BC. And that's still in Canada. There are many people who have immigrated here who have never hiked before. And you're not doing anyone a service by being like, what? You've never hiked before? Don't come
Yeah.
with us because we're like extreme hikers. It's like, or you could just not be a schmuck and help them.
Yeah.
Like, because at some
Like,
point someone helped you,
yeah,
I don't
it,
know.
I'm thinking about like, if the question of like, what are some, like, how can we come up with like solutions or ideas? Like, I really think it does just come down to, it only takes one person to kind of be that spark or or like that, I don't know, lack of it, or like the lifeboat to just bring people on and like start having those positive interactions. There's Kelly Starrett talked about in they were in a city, but they brought it down to their little neighborhood, and they started at a point, they just started doing a walking school bus. So
Cool.
it was a bunch of families, in a, call it a cul-de-sac, had kids, relatively same age. And it was like, as a parent, sometimes you lose some of those social interactions with like your age of people because you're interacting with your kids. And that's probably like a whole other thing we could probably talk about at some point, with like have a teacher on or some version of that. But they would, their kids would walk to school, so they're getting physical activity. They would be walking, and then they'd be interacting with parents that are going through the same challenges of having a 7-year old that just drew outside the lines at school, for example, whatever it might be. And like they're gaining positive interaction for that. I thought that was, yeah, it was just a cool story. I think it was in his book or something like that. I really like that. It
Yeah, dude.
just took one, it took one family to be like, hey, we drive to school 10 minutes, both of us. Why don't we take a 20-minute walk to school in the morning? And
That's
yeah,
good. I really like that. That's like
yeah,
and it also, I think, it speaks to like the priority of socialization. Like I think as humans we crave movement biologically. But I would think I would struggle to make the argument that we crave like physical movement more than we crave like social connections, you know?
yeah,
And like it's like, hey, let's go for a walk. It's not like let's go for a walk because we love walking. It's like let's go for a walk first of all because we know it's healthy, but also we get to do it together and we get to be together
yeah,
and we get to have more
yeah.
conversations together, you know. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's a really cool habit to create. I think another thing like that kind of is like in conjunction with that is like being an initiator is really big. I think a lot of people will move into rural communities and they'll be like I wish that this town had this. And I think being an initiator, being like, oh, maybe I'll just start it. Like it's as hard as like making a Facebook post for the most part. Like that's it.
Yeah,
It's like, hey, does anyone want to go for a hike? Someone's gonna be like, yeah, cool, right on. I also think like being like courageous in initiating the interaction, same sort of thing. It's like not that person. So for myself, this is a really interesting thing. So I just got my core and my pal. I am an
nice.
immigrant kid. I didn't grow up hunting. I didn't grow up with parents that hunt. And when you're in a small town, not in a dissimilar way to hockey, you kind of go, this is a very legacy orientated activity. It's something that like fathers teach sons. And then like when you're an adult, it feels quite intimidating to be like, hey, I didn't grow up shooting guns. I didn't grow up skinning animals. But when I started telling people, when I started asking about whether I want, I started asking people what they thought about, if I should make the jump into getting my pal, getting my core. I had so many people be like, yeah, I'll take you hunting. I'll show you. And I'm like, That was so much that was so much better than I thought it would be. I honestly thought that asking people to help show me how to hunt, I was going to be met with a bunch of people who are like, "Oh, well, actually, I only go hunting with my brother, or I only go hunting with my dad." And like
Yeah.
basically everyone I talked to was like, "Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just be hunting."
Tag along. That'd
Like
be awesome.
that was like that felt like me going out on a risk. And all I was met with was people who, were very excited for me to do the thing that they love to do.
Yeah.
And that's
Which, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess the moral of the story is we got to start a Jits club in Smithers.
we do. Did I tell you? I think I told you this. So when I moved up to Smithers, I was like, man, I miss jujitsu, but I was never good enough because I didn't do it long enough that I could be like a coach. Uh, And so I messaged a bunch of Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools in Vancouver, and I was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Smithers? You should move up here." I did that to like 6 different schools in Vancouver. I was like, "Hey, if anyone is looking to move, Smithers is a beautiful place. We have beautiful mountains." And everyone was like, "Okay, cool. Thanks for letting us know. We'll let you know if we're ever wanting to move to a
Yeah.
small town." And I was like, "Okay, well,
Well, thank
maybe,
you.
yeah, thank you. Maybe
Maybe
someone will
you
email."
put it out there. You put it out there.
All I can do, and they
Yeah.
said no. And I don't cry that much about it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting close to wrapping up.
Yeah.
I'm. Do you wanna go for a walk together next Wednesday morning?
For
A
sure,
rep.
dude.
Now that we've talked about it, lead by example and do it.
Dude, we can do I have my Wednesday morning adult fitness class, but I'll on some morning I will 100% do a ruck walk with you.
Let's do it. Thursday morning,
Thursday.
possibly.
Yeah.
We'll make it work.
We'll make it
We'll
work.
post. We'll post when we've done it so that people don't say that we're just not walking the walk too.
Yeah, dude. Maybe other people will come rucking. Hunters are
Oh,
big at rucking. So, you know,
yeah.
why not?
Yeah. I'm sure we get a few people.
Dude, we can do that.
I've been pretty urban style rucking. I just put my weight in my backpack and walk around town, kind of like go on the outskirts, but we could get crazy too. The
Dude.
Bears are probably kind of sleeping now.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like what they say, like, we don't need to be able to outrun a bear. We just need to be able to outrun the slowest person in our group.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And they'll be the ones that we add a few extra pounds of weight in.
yeah. Oh, that might be like the worst example of trying to include someone who's like not on your fitness level.
Yeah.
Dude, some person's just like, yeah, I really struggle with asthma, or like, I'm recovering from my broken leg. Can I go rucking with you? And I'm like, we would love to have you because we're going into bear country.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
That would be
No.
maybe the worst
But
way
yeah.
of being inclusive.
Yeah. Cool,
But
dude.
if you are unfit and you want to go rucking, then we will not leave you to the bears.
No,
Dude,
definitely not.
solid. Well,
Awesome. That's
dude,
it.
that's it,
Recording
man.
roll. Episode
Recording
3.
for episode 3. Cheers, man. We'll hopefully this will catalyze a lot of interest and suggestions on how people in rural communities can get into different levels of physical activity and be social and hospitable while they do it. And also, I guess before we close off here, big announcement would be that hopefully we're going to have a guest, our first guest on our next
First
episode.
guest next week.
Stay tuned. We're not going to tell you who it is, just in case they back out. But there
But
will be one.
we took the step and we reached out
We reached
to
out.
try and be social in a very social way. And we'll see what happens.
That's it. That's all we can do.
Cool, dude.
See
Talk in
you.
a week. See you, buddy.
Bye.